utilize the unit to interview children. So that's a little bit about me. I kind of want to know who else in the room, just who we have, who are the partner agencies that make the multidisciplinary team, and then other community partners that we work closely with. So I see some law enforcement just because they got their gear, so glad that they're here. Besides these guys being in law enforcement, anyone else? Okay, thank you. How about our CPS partners, our child protection folks? Great, awesome. Our advocates, lots of advocates, fantastic. How about our medical people? Okay, awesome, fantastic. Our prosecutors, any prosecutors? Dang it. Sometimes we get at least one. How about our mental health folks? Okay, very good, very good. And our CAC people, okay. Forensic interviewers, okay, fantastic. How about other community partners that are not part of the multidisciplinary team, but certainly work with them because you provide services like school resource officers, or tell me your agency again. I know she mentioned it. Domestic violence shelter. We definitely work in conjunction with them. And then there was another agency up here. Who was? Okay. Okay, the counseling. Lots of different services that you provide. That's great. Any other agency that I might have not mentioned? I saw someone that had a CASA t-shirt. Any CASAs here? Fantastic. I love CASAs. We have that in Oklahoma, and they do amazing work for our kiddos after they've been through the multidisciplinary team program and all of that, right? Through our CACs, then we send them on, pass the baton to someone else. So thank you all for being here. We have lots of different topics to talk about. Have any of you worked with victims of trafficking, either sexual or labor? Okay, so a few of you that have worked those cases. So we're going to start out with, and she's going to bring out those handouts in a little bit, so you can kind of follow along. Oh, I'm not sure. There we go. That is, uh-oh. Not sure what happened. Hit the end button. We started out so well, and then it changes. Okay, let me just make sure. There we go. Okay, just a quick disclaimer is that anything that I say today is not intended to be legal advice. That when you're working cases, that could be any type of case, domestic violence, sexual abuse, you know, that you're working with your local prosecutors, local attorneys. And we definitely want to give credit to Victor Vieth, who is one of our senior directors at Zero Abuse Project. And he's a huge researcher, a huge person in our field, the person that created the train the trainer model in teaching the protocol to folks in their own community so they can teach other folks within their community about interviewing children. So definitely want to thank him for that. So for this presentation in rural and interfamiliar human trafficking, we're going to talk about human trafficking in America, identifying the victims and the traffickers, understanding the victim, cooperation, the things that we need to do to be able to corroborate those cases so that we're not just focusing on the victim's testimony and how they have to stand alone with their information, right? There's other things that we could do to corroborate their statements. And then some investigative resources to have. Um, in your PowerPoints, that handouts, you might have Oklahoma, just because I didn't have time to switch that before I sent the PowerPoints. But I wanted to give you this resource in looking at trafficking, depending on by state, and see how, because they collect all the information. I was kind of surprised that in 2020 there was no reported new cases in New Mexico for human trafficking, but there were still 24 defendants that they had worked through, cases that had come in from the past that were still going through the system, that were being affected through that process. There was 2 convictions in 2020. 2 out of the 6 defendants did go through the court trial process, but both of them, all of them, got prison time. But the 2 that went through trial definitely got some prison time. The average months that they were sentenced to is 114 months. I think it's a little low myself, but different states do different things. Different jurors think different things. I think I always want to make sure that we're educating our public and doing that recognizing and reporting and educating a lot of our community partners, because all of us could be potentially jurors, right? And unfortunately, those of us that work in the field, we probably won't get selected for certain cases. So we got to educate those folks that are out there so they can really understand the process. And then, so they got 100% got prison time, and I messed that up because it's 114 was the average for 2020, and the 2021 was 65 months that they got there. The interesting thing that report told me is the court did not order those suspects, those defendants, to pay restitution to the victims. And I always think that should be a priority. Do victims ever see those funds directly? Ooh, lean on that too hard. They probably don't. But sometimes those funds that come from defendants go into a pot that go to victim services. That's how we get the Victims of Crimes Act, because federal prisoners and federal judgments against companies go into that pot. We're getting a lot less nowadays, but that's how we get it. So that was interesting to me, about New Mexico judges not making those defendants pay restitution, right? And again, sometimes it's not directly to the victim, but to a fund for victim services. This was interesting, this Polaris study, and this is not necessarily cases that were confirmed in the United States, but this map sort of depicts reported contacts with different population and the density of population where calls come in to the hotline, but that's not necessarily cases about human trafficking, but certainly some contact with agencies there. So the definition of human trafficking, what it is and what it's not, is basically compelling another person to provide labor or a service, right? And commercial sex. And there's 2 types of human trafficking, labor and sex trafficking. Of the cases that I saw in that state report, you guys had no cases from 2018 to 2021 that were labor cases in New Mexico. Oklahoma has had an increase in labor trafficking types of cases because we passed a law that for medical marijuana, but the legislator did such a poor job putting that law into place that it made it almost recreational, a recreational law. And so we had a huge explosion of marijuana, what is it, plantations or whatever you want to call them, farmings uh, that people started, grows, that's what they call them, grows, um, there. And so we saw a lot of folks getting trafficked to work those areas. And we had a lot of them be Asian folks. And that was really surprising as well, because a lot of those businesses were being run by Asians. So we've had a huge increase. Is medical marijuana or marijuana recreational here in New Mexico? Yeah. Have you guys seen an explosion of gross, and or that's pretty? Oh yeah, yeah. Nobody's can. No, Oklahoma really. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We definitely have seen that. But Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics have really went after that because we did have something already in place. Those task force that were fighting meth, because we had a lot of meth growing in our state, and so they just continue fighting that battle. And so we saw a huge increase in labor trafficking. So what it is not, and a lot of people do confuse this, that it's not child sexual abuse material, right? It's just it doesn't mean that just because someone has that those images that is considered trafficking. There has to be something else that happens there. Adult prostitution, that's not. Um, Unsafe working conditions is not always because they have unsafe working condition doesn't mean that that's labor trafficking, right? Um, and then, or labor violations, or human smuggling. It's not necessarily trafficking, right? It's smuggling. Um, so this are two United States statutes for labor and trafficking, sex trafficking cases. A lot of times, local folks don't work those cases because they'd rather see federal cases, federal agencies work those cases and make it federal because they get higher punishments too. And so it's wise, right? I think it is wise when they can say, hey, if we can get the feds involved because it has a multi-state thing, which a lot of the marijuana or sex trafficking, um, labor trafficking, it encompasses that multi-state jurisdiction. So they let the feds kind of take that over. I did look up New Mexico statute for human trafficking. So if you're not familiar with that, that's the statute that you can look at it. I like the fact that you guys had different penalties: third degree felony, second degree felony, and first degree felony. That included those ages, right? Depending on the age of the child, that it would be um, a greater punishment the younger the kid is. And then you passed a bill in 2020 that proposed the increase in penalties, which that's fantastic that happened. Um, yeah, we in Oklahoma, we recently passed a law where there's has to be a lot more notification to the victims about the defendants. And I thought that was really good for our state. Um, so at least, and it's going to, and it's people, it takes people like you all that are here to have that conversation with the legislators, right? To uh, have more laws in place to deter this type of behavior to continue happening. So the elements of trafficking that needs to include, there's got to be an action, there's got to be a means, right? Usually it's a human that provides that service, and then the purpose, what's happening. So the action is the recruitment, the enticement, harboring, transporting, and they provide, obtain or advertise, maintain, patronize, solicit any person, right? The means is more of that includes that force and fraud and coercion. So there's got to be something that gets that person involved in that process. And obviously, with little kids, right, it's really easy to coerce them and to force them into that. And then the purpose is usually commercial sex act or labor or services, right? They're getting something out of it. That's why the cartels, they are transporting drugs, but they have a component of utilizing humans, right? Because a human can continue to provide that service, that money flow for them, unlike the drugs you have to create that, you have to manufacture it, you have to be patient to grow it, right? To make it, to grow it, to package it, all of those things. Where a person, it can give you service, service pretty quickly, and a income stream pretty fast as well. The no means element when it involves minors. It just, minors are a different thing when it involves minors. And then traffickers may have reasonable opportunity to observe, right? With those minors, it could be services, anything, any benefit that they're getting out of that, and obviously the victimization of themselves. So some statistics that you look at, and we're going to throw a lot of statistics at you that is just helpful to know, or you can look up as well. And I think these are statistics of cases that we know of, right? And we can speculate that could be a lot more people involved in this type of service or organizations or trafficking or those things. Nearly 50 million people were living in modern slavery conditions globally in 2021. That's a lot of people that are still, and you know, we think of it, it's like we want to think here in America, it's like that does not happen in America. We want to think that this is third world country kind of stats, that it happens Philippines and a lot of other countries, you know. No, it's happening here in our backyards. What do we need to be doing to help this statistic? Educating parents, educating kids about the dangers, right? Because changing the suspects and catching them all the time, it's just not working, right? It's hard to catch them. We have some job security, let me tell you. Not that we get paid very much. Because we're not doing this for the money, right? Any of you doing this for the money? Because you're in the wrong field if you're doing it for the money. That's for sure. Not to judge, but I'm just saying. Offenders are using gaming platforms, disappearing message apps, lots of apps out there. You can't keep up with them, right? Law enforcement will take 1 or 2 or 3 down, you know, and it takes a while to get them down because they all fall into that freedom of speech stuff, which is great that we have that for our country, and I'm thankful for that. But it just more come up every time. Encrypted communication gets the kids live streaming because it's not being recorded, or at least not recording then. They might have a different device recording it, right? Because that becomes problematic. Kidnapping rarely is used for initiation into human trafficking. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen and we don't have those cases, and we still need to be safe with our children in the community, and we have to educate them. But it doesn't happen as often as kids being abused online, being abused by other folks, in that they know the kid, right? They have a connection with the child. So risk factors, recent migration, relocation, right? We've had a huge, and it's not about how you feel about the border issues one way or the other. It's not about that. But it's about thinking about victimization, that in that row of that migration, how many victims have not come out of that, right? And probably still being victimized through that process. Substance use, runaway, homelessness, mental health, and again, involvement in child welfare system. Trafficking is most often relational, where someone makes a connection with that kiddo, right? They have that grooming process. How many of you have heard about grooming or manipulation? Yeah. So that is a huge part of that process, right? Sometimes the grooming happens online first, where they make the connection with the child. They get to know the child first, and then they have hands-on. Familial trafficking is increasing, and traffickers are far more likely to be an acquaintance or intimate partner, family member, or an online contact than a stranger. Because we used to teach stranger danger to our kids, right? And it, like I said, it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. That strangers may do something to our kids, but our kids are more likely to tell about a stranger doing something, right? And sometimes those cases are the ones that end up in homicide, right? But the others are where they build that connection, not only with our children, but they groom the environment, they groom the parents. And that becomes problematic. So again, some statistics in recruitment trafficking, higher numbers are intimate partner, marriage proposition, right? Familial, false promises, job offer, right? Just think about those migrants that are coming in seeking a better life because of work, wanting financial stability, security, right? How a trafficker could really build on that, right? On those basic needs that folks have. Hopefully you'll be able to see this a little bit better in your handouts. Again, you see the threats to report immigration status, a huge number, a huge percentage, the highest. Withholding needs or wants, right? You can convince people to do about anything in exchange for something that they really want and need. And that could be financial stability, that could be love and attention. It could be, you know, a phone for some kids, right? It could be different things for some kids. Again, victims of sex trafficking, induces exploitation through substance abuse, where kids are using substances and to meet their need, right, is how they able to get into that situation. Sometimes it's physical abuse, threats, weapons that can be made to have this people identified. We saw definitely an increase in trafficking through the pandemic. Why do you think that would have been something that would increase that type of abuse?
People were stuck in place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything was pretty much transitioned online.
Online, right? And a lot of times we didn't have a lot of supervision with kids online. We gave them the tools, but no guidelines. Sometimes the parents weren't educated. I know I've been in this field and being in law enforcement, I'm a lot less knowledgeable about technology than my husband was. And so I said, you be the person to handle our stuff with our kids. Of course, my kids were already growing through the pandemic, but I can imagine having kids still at school during that time. My son was graduating then, but I can't imagine being a parent and having to still work, still be online myself, right? And having to have safeguards and have supervision on the children. And so a lot of perpetrators took advantage of that, right? Where that happened. Identifying human trafficking, sometimes it may be mistaken for or connected to other crimes. And I think a lot of the times we focus on this other crime and not investigate and talk to the victims in an open kind of way where they can disclose that information. I know as an interviewer, we are now being educated and taught to explore other types of victimization within our own interview. Child First is the only model that includes poly-victimization as part of our process, where we're educating our interviewers to ask that. When I started 24 years ago, I wasn't asking children, have you ever had someone ask you to take pictures or send pictures? Did you receive pictures online? Because that didn't exist back then, right? Not in the way that we see it now. And so we should be asking those things and happening. I worked a case not long ago in south part of the state when it was a couple of domestic violence. There was history of domestic violence, and the husband started trafficking the spouse in the disguise of, I like to be a little freaky and sometimes watch, and I want to watch you having sex with someone else. And there's nothing wrong when you have consenting adults, and this is what the thing is. But then she found out that he was getting money. So there's the service, right? There's the benefit, right? So now the wife is being trafficked. She was being taken to other locations, and he was making those connections online, and then taking his wife to have sex with other people, and then he was getting money. I was interviewing the daughters, and eventually there was a big blow up, right? And so she finally said, no more. I'm leaving this time for sure. I'm getting a divorce. The teenage girls, the daughters, were really upset at mom. It's like, why now? And how are you now saying that my dad was doing all these things? In interviewing the older daughter,
she was saying all the things that we hear the public say about the mom. Well, why didn't she just tell somebody? Why didn't she say no? And why would she allow my dad to convince her to have sex with other people so he can watch? Because mom eventually told the oldest, and then the younger one had heard some of the conversations too. The younger one was so upset and emotional because she thought, how disgusting. But she didn't hear the conversation about dad was getting money for it. Right? So sometimes we miss some of those discussions with victims about, has other things happened in your relationship that you have not been able to tell anyone, right? That they might be too embarrassed to talk about, right? Mom was so embarrassed, but the daughter was so upset at her, especially the oldest. The oldest wouldn't even go with the mom when she left. She stayed with the dad because she's like, you put up with that is not bad, you know, you're doing this, you know. She was in that cycle of violence, right? Trying to figure out, how do we survive without dad? And dad is the one that works, and you put up with that. How is that any worse? So then finally mom said, well, let me tell you what he's also been doing to me, right? And then the daughter is like, I don't know who to believe. My dad is saying it didn't happen. Now she's saying this, and you know, why didn't she stop it? Why didn't she go to the police? Why didn't she tell me? I would have helped her. And I'm thinking, well, you wouldn't have believed her. That's why she wouldn't tell you, you know? And it's embarrassing, right? Yes, ma'am.
Yep. I also think that when people come and tell you, whomever you are, about this going on, like, you have to start from the position of believing, right? Because I'm aware of a situation here where a 12-year-old was called in as a runaway. Chronic is what they call it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And when law enforcement responded, she told them, you know, this guy actually started asking some questions instead of just loading her up and taking her home.
Right.
He was like, so what's going on? Why are you running away? And she said, because I'm sick of homeschooling, of course, during COVID or around the area. And he's like, well, what's wrong with homeschooling? You know, he thought, well, she's just mad at her mom or whatever, right?
Right.
And, but he asked the question, he said, well, so what's going on at homeschool? Tell me what you don't like about it. And she said, well, every morning I get dressed and I get cleaned up, I get dressed, I go to the neighbor's house, I have sex with him, and I bring drugs back to my mom. And she said, I don't want to do that anymore, right? He calls the supervisor, and the supervisor says, kid's lying, this is a chronic runaway, take her home. So he took her home. Then another case, pulled over a car that had a male and like 4 younger, I don't know, you know, I didn't get the ages, but 50 hard drives in the trunk, and nobody says, oh, this is not normal, right? And let them go. But they say here, oh, there's no trafficking here. I'm like, well, not if you don't see it.
Not if you don't want to see it or work it.
And that's it. Yeah, if you don't want to see it,
because you're seeing it, you just don't want to work it,
right?
And recognize it and deal with that. But I love the way you said that the officer said, how come you run around? The why, right? Not what's wrong with you, what's going on with you, right? What's happening that's causing the behavior.
Right, the traffickers aren't going to say to her, I'm going to go have sex with you, right? They say, you're going to the gym, you're going to, you know, homeschool. They call it something normal, so that when they're picked up, nobody keys in on it particularly, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a victim that is just running away. Yeah, it's a juvenile crime, right? How about the ones that do get caught out there where they call prostitution, which is, you shouldn't call it prostitution when it involves a child, right? I worked a case where the girl had drugs with her. She was out with folks that had a car chop shop kind of stuff, and so she was arrested too. It was through the intake that by asking questions, that they thought, yeah, something's happening with this girl while she's out there.
We also have had 2 cases of cult, like religious cult trafficking. And they're like, no one believes this. No one, you know, and they gave me the name of the cult because sounds a little, you know, different than what you're used to. And sure enough, you look them up and that's the cult. There's a thing, you know. And so it's I always say the crazier the story, probably the more it happened, right?
Right.
Because people
And
wanna make
unfortunately,
this
we
up,
don't want to
right?
believe. Right,
Right, yeah.
right. How do we make this up with all these? Is like we need to look into that, right? We need to look into it. Because on that case of the girl running away and taken back, all we need to do is find out with mom. Call CPS. Does mom have drug problems? How does she get the drugs? You know, that alone should have taken that kid out of the home, right? And cooperating and doing that investigation. So we gotta be thorough, right? Especially in the initial phase of the investigations. Sometimes the victims themselves are uncooperative because they have been told to not say anything. They've been threatened, or they're fearful about anyone finding out what's going on. It's having that proactive approaches in operation. Traffickers hide or disguise their victims. They don't want to get caught, so they make sure the victims don't tell, right? Or they disguise the story, or they say different things. But it's up to us to follow that through the process of actually working the cases. So exploring vulnerability, and the key to human trafficking is finding out, is this all meeting this, right? Minor female, abuse victim of sexual, physical, emotional abuse, substance abuse in the home, or they themselves are using substances because that could keep them in there. Poverty, running away, foster care, disabilities. I was at a training that I heard one of the directors and one of the human trafficking services there in the city, and she talked about that kids with special needs have a higher risk of being trafficked. And the number one is kids with Down syndrome. And I'm like, there's an extra place in hell for those people that take advantage of those kids. But why not? I mean, it fits all the categories, right? People that need help, they're looking for reassurance and care and support, that need the attention, right? And so that would be easy to manipulate them into doing something like this. Their gender, right? How they identify sexually. Kids in our LGBTQ plus community are at a higher risk as well. So indicators, a restriction, freedom or movement, right? It could be that runaway that's being told not to do certain things, right? But what is it they're running from? And where is they're running to, right? What is it that they're getting when they run away, right? That they may not be getting that met where they live. Sexually explicit online profiles, debt to an employer. A lot of times that involves those migrants, workers, because they had to pay a sum to get smuggled into the country, and now they're being held because now they have to pay, right? Have to pay that sum, but the way they charge them for everything, they're never going to be able to get out of that debt, right? And so they're stuck in that situation. Lack of personal possessions. I told you about that girl that got arrested, and the only thing she was running away from home. Mom had a huge drug addiction, really introduced the girl to drug use when she was 12, and her brother also. The dad was sort of the safe person, but he was oblivious. right? He would let mom come in and out of the home. The kids were coming in and out of the home when they needed to. Kid was not going to school, and it was her and her brother that were both runaways, but they would come in sometimes. And so she had nothing with her. And she was just going from one place to the next. When she was recovered or identified, she had a little purse, and she had a bunch of papers that had numbers on it. And just different people that had written down numbers for her. She had nothing else other than some weed also, drugs with her, but she was doing a lot more than just weed. Tattoos of currency or money bags or other names, large cash, sometimes debit cards. Sometimes they have a lot of motel keys. You know, now that I travel quite a bit for work, I end up having sometimes 2 or 3 sets of keys in my bag from different hotels that I've been at. So they're probably doing the same thing. Several communication devices that they use, self-produced CSAM, when they're taking pictures and sharing those things that you might find in their own phone. That it might be that it's not just them taking it themselves just because they want to, it's because someone's asking for those, right? Lying about their age or identity. The girl lied about her age that I interviewed. What was really interesting is she was in detention because she was arrested first after she was identified, and several people had talked to her and they really confirmed, okay, there's some things going on with this girl that we need to interview her formally, and she's now going to be identified as a trafficking victim, so they let her get out. They got her out of the juvenile system, and then they ended up taking her to a shelter that's way south of Oklahoma City. And they, so I interviewed her, but this now was several weeks later. And when I interviewed her, there was a couple of things that were interesting. Here's the cops who had identified her or arrested her out in the field. There were guys that worked at Vice in another county. And they're like, oh my gosh, she looks like a kid. That is not the kid that I saw out in the street. That's not how she behaved. That's not how she talked. And that is not what she looked like, right? I didn't see it, I didn't see pictures, but it was impactful for that officer. The other thing that happened there is that with trafficking victims, and we'll talk more about interviewing, is that you have to decide, are you gonna interview them about the business side of it, of everything that happens and them being trafficked, right? Or are you gonna talk about the acts that they've had to endure, right? And so the officers initially just wanted me to talk about the business, right? To get the people, because a lot of times you can't identify those folks that perpetrated on them, right? So you don't necessarily, unless they want to talk about it, unless they can identify a specific individual or they have anything that could possibly identify them. But we ended up talking about this one place that she went, and she identified the male, African-American male, that went by a whatever nickname. And that was a nickname that the officers knew because they worked the task force, the drug task force, as well as the trafficking, sexual abuse stuff. And they're like, we have been trying to make a case on this guy for a long time and we have not been able to do it. And so they had me talk about if he did anything, and of course he did, something to that kid, and had her talk about everything that happened in detail so they could charge him with the sexual abuse. And now they were going to have a case on that. So you just never know what all they're able to give you. The other thing that was impressionable with that child was that in that particular interview setting, we had 2 chairs and then we had an easel with a flip chart. And some people use that and some people don't in some of the interview rooms, but that particular one had one. And because I was talking to her about the business side of that, right, what began first and next and how things worked, I did a timeline. I drew a line on that flip chart, and then I put different things that happened first and then the next thing, and we were writing, both of us were writing things down, and she was short, little, I'm a big girl, so I kept, stay seated, but sometimes she would get up and write on there, but as we got to the very end of it, she was standing up and she stood up and she's kind of sighing, she's like, that's my life. Like, this is the first time that she's looking back, and now she had regurgitated all that information, right? And now she's like, oh my gosh, this is my life. This is what I just went through, right? It was impactful to her to go through that process and being able to talk about what it is. I know sometimes our investigators say, oh, we have enough, don't worry about it, just go ahead and end it, because we have enough, we don't need to talk anymore. Because these cases could go on and on and on because there's so much. We should give them the opportunity to get everything out, right? If we have to do a multi-session interview, Child First has an expanded process protocol that we use for difficult cases, and one of them is for trafficking victims, because sometimes they need a lot more time to disclose all that. Human trafficking happens with social media, right? Lots of different apps and lots of different ways that they could get victims as well. It could be traffic stops. Do we have our traffic stops in our highways that go through our communities? Are we checking that, right? Are we having working some of those cases? Massage parlors, travel stops that are on the big highways. Do we have folks that have jurisdiction working those areas? Rural communities are no different. You know, a lot of people think rural communities that have no other services, but yet they have trafficking victims happening. They do. I work with Homeland Security and 2 different law enforcement jurisdictions because mom was selling her older girl, I think she was 11, maybe 10, because she said that she loved having sex, and she was finding people to have sex with her daughter on Facebook. And Facebook works really well, law enforcement, and they have, you know, ways of identifying some of that stuff. So immediately a tip comes in. After that, I ended up interviewing that 11-year-old who had been a victim of sexual abuse by her biological dad, who now she calls and refers to a sperm donor. He's in prison. She had been through the system multiple times because mom has drug use, addiction, and so now mom has been on and off of drugs, have been in and out of the system. When mom is on, she gets taken away, and then mom recovers, works her plan, they give her back, and then mom does really good. She now had found someone else, and she had another daughter who was 6 years old, and they had asked me to interview them. And the local law enforcement and where I interviewed the kid, they did their own interviews there. But because the sister had autism, they didn't feel comfortable doing it. And thank goodness they called me, to do it because I know that that law enforcement officer wouldn't have used the dolls. And the younger kid disclosed that the older girl, the victim, didn't disclose anything. Everything was fine. Nobody did anything. She loved her stepdad. Everything was fine. But the younger kid said that boys get naked, sister get naked, and they hump her, and then she goes and tells mom. And then a man comes and gives mom money that he brings in a suitcase. Now that sounds really bizarre and crazy, right? But we know mom is done. Something's happening because we have her on Facebook trying to sell mom, right? So we've got some cooperation there. But then the next thing that the girl says is the dad also gets naked. Her biological dad gets naked, and sister gets naked, and they hump. She has to go tell mom because mom usually watches on TV what's happening with sister. So, but she has to go tell mom when dad gets naked with sister, and mom gets really mad at dad because she's probably not getting the money, right? I had to use the dolls because the girl couldn't tell me what humping was verbally, and so she used the dolls. And thank goodness that our prosecutor was able to file on that case because we didn't have anything on the stepdad because the older girl didn't disclose anything, right? So we had to connect that, because he could deny that the woman, the mother, was doing anything on Facebook and not say anything. But residential brothels also are big, right? Where people in very nice neighborhoods come in and settle in, and they start having Johns come in, and they're trafficking people out of there, right? So we can't say that it just happens in rural areas. It happens on the poverty communities, that are low-income communities, where they're faced with poverty. No, it happens anywhere and everywhere, right? Those residential brothels basically is what they are. They're informal, they're cash-based, they're underground, sort of a business that they're doing. They operate in non-commercial areas or just any residential area. Escort agencies, right? They get basically where they advertise, right? They're pimping adults and minors. They really don't care. But they use language sometimes to say barely legal, really young virgins, right? That they're going to get more money, but they're trying to advertise those younger girls. They tend to, the traffickers tend to demand quotas, right? How many people are they functioning? The more that they're doing out there, right? The longer they have them doing the whatever service they're wanting, the more money they're making. And a lot of times these folks are not, might have not been addicted to drugs, and then they force them to use drugs because they can keep doing what they're doing, right? For them, so they can get that. But kids who are already addicted to drugs, they're at higher risk through that process, but then they use the drugs to keep them there because they provide the drugs for them. So different statistics as well, that 60% of victimized children are encountered by a major nonprofit, were advertised online, for not-for-profit, were advertised online. 1,000 American children are arrested for prostitution. I'm using that term because that's what the research says, not my word. I got in trouble for saying that. It's not that I'm not being sensitive, but that's what the research says. And up to 1 to 7 runaways that are reported to NCMEC were likely victims of sex trafficking as well. And again, a lot of times they might get recovered as a runaway, but they don't want to disclose of what's happening to them. And a lot of it is like she was talking about, as how that first person that talks to them, it impacts them, right? It's like the cases that we normally see with our sex abuse or physical abuse young victims, that it's hard for people to talk about those things that they're experiencing. And a lot of it has to be to that person that they're encountering that they might decide to talk to. The Internet Crimes Against Children investigators indicate that technology plays a very important role in sex trafficking, right? 80% of those. So high number for sure. And again, how technology facilitates that process through different apps. And they go through a grooming process. They're recruiting them, they make them feel well, or sometimes they're coerced after maybe they sent pictures or something, right? We've had a lot of kids committing suicide because they were forced to send pictures, or they were coerced into it by maybe thinking they were sending it to a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a friend, and then they get extorted, right? When then, if you don't do this, then I'm gonna share it. And everyone's gonna know what you've been doing, right? So then the kids might take their own life, or they might run away, right? And get into that situation. I've had kids that get money for sending pictures. What kid does not want money? I worked a case with a licensed driver's ed teacher, where he was teaching kids how to drive, and it was mainly boys that he was doing this with. And through that, he was getting to know the kids, right, through that process. And they were exchanging numbers because they decide where to meet and what time they're gonna get picked up, and then to go driving or dropped off or whatever. So he had their cell numbers and started communicating with them through messaging, and then sometimes they would go to different apps. He started having parties at his house, and what do you think he had at the party? What would be attracted to kids at a party? Alcohol and some weed, right? Some kids thought he was a little weird, especially when they went to the party, but it was still the driver's ed teacher, right? And then he started asking for pictures. And one of the kids, they would, depending on what pictures they sent, they got money. So he would say, hey, I'll give you $50 if you send me a picture of your chest. $100 if you send me a picture of the down there, right? And one kid said, well, yeah, I sent him a picture of my penis, but it wasn't my penis. I wanted $100. He said he would give me $100. And I'm like, you're gonna get far in life. Like, yeah, I sent him a picture of a penis, but it wasn't my penis. I wonder how he chose the penis too. So yeah, so, you know, kids are gonna want some of that stuff, right? So sometimes they get hooked into that. And that kid is the one that ended up telling his golf coach, because the coach has started hearing things, and the coach knew that he talked to that kid would tell him the truth. And he said, yeah, I did it, but I didn't send him any pictures. He sent him a picture of himself to get the $50 of just the top, right? But then when he was asking for more, he's like, I'm not gonna do that. I'll send him one, I'll get the money, but yeah. So offenders can get to kids in different ways, for sure. Why is this not working out? well, this is falling asleep, but I do need to give you a break already because we're moving along, but still, you've been sitting for a while. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and we'll come back and finish. Yeah, I need to send that because I sit a lot, so that's the problem. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like it.
Excellent job.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I bet. Check the coffee.
You're saying only those who have direct access to, which you could have direct access
If they were trying to say we didn't include them, we've been waiting for the day that you guys want us.
I've seen her before. Yes, exactly. Thank you for looking at that. That's the one That's the problem, yeah, that is. Yeah. Especially to get around the issue, you don't want to. IFM course last December, or this is after you. So they're done, right?
I got that information.
Oh, did you run over there? Good.
This doesn't make any sense.
Oh, are you working?
Right.
Well, yeah, Zero Use College is actually in Minnesota. It's a nonprofit agency out of Minnesota. We're all of us are. So I'm in Oklahoma. We have like, several people had quit, so now I think we're down to like 24 employees. But we're like, so it's yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. We do a lot of recognizing and reporting. We started a program that's now evidence-based where we're going in, and that program's in Minnesota that they've done, but now they're doing it in other states. Where teaching teachers the same model that we do Child First to teach forensic interviewers. Now they're using the same model to teach teachers, doing train the trainer model, where we go in and train teachers, so then teachers can train other teachers in their own jurisdiction, the prevention and body safety, and from kindergarten all the way to 12. So we're doing that. We have a team that works with adult survivors in cyberspace. We have like 6 different programs. Mine is the forensic interview. Yes. Well, I basically volunteer at its TAC just to keep my credentials up and still do it. In Oklahoma, I work with that CAC that used to be my agency, where I do forensic interviews. So I volunteer. So when I'm off from Zero Abuse Project and I go to interviews, and I have to take off if I have to go to court, but I do testify as an expert anywhere in the country if I'm requested. So we testify as experts as well. That's another tool. We do technical assistance too for Zero Abuse Project. But I'm still really connected to the CAC that I worked with before I'm on the board. Just a police officer. I have an associate's in police science because that's where I got started. Just because I'm bilingual and I was a police officer, and all my training has been as an interviewer. And that's what it takes to be an interviewer. You don't have to have. Some centers require a bachelor's degree. Some require a master's degree because they use their interviewer also for like therapy assessments, just to check in with the kid as your forensic interviewer. But typically, to be an interviewer, you work in the field, hands-on, and that's how you get your training. Yeah. Criminal justice, yes. If I had to do my career over again, I would be an analyst or crime scene tech. Working that, if I had to do it over, that's what I would move on into. But you know, sometimes you're playing, like, I had never thought I would be outside of law enforcement. That was my dream, just to be in law enforcement. And I love working with victims. So I thought I was going to work with domestic violence victims and doing that, you know, SUV kind of unit. But sometimes life just happens, and you know, I had my kids, and then I moved, and it was just not. I never wanted to lose my commission, but I got pregnant in that time. And then it was like, there's no way I could keep my commission. I would have to go through another academy. I'm not going to do that with little kids. And so then I started interviewing, and that's how it happened. Yeah. No, nice to meet you too. But keep at school, that's for sure, and stay connected with the team. Volunteer, do a lot of that work, is making those connections. Nice to see you. Congrats. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, I love all this connecting with each other, and because I think always making connections is great, and people in your community is great for sure. So I love this networking. So moving on. For some reason, sometimes they go to sleep. So again, talking about different populations that make children a little bit more vulnerable. And this is children who are African American. 52% were arrested for commercial sex acts. And then in Los Angeles, 91% of girls in that court were involved in sex trafficking. There were victims. There were also African American or Latino children. And then studies have shown that 50 to 90% of children in traffic are child welfare. I mean, it's just another research that tells us the exact same thing, that kids are more vulnerable. 40% of homeless youth identified as LGBTQ, makes them at a higher risk also for human trafficking. And it's estimated that 1 in 4 homeless children are identified as LGBTQ for a lot of different reasons, right? But can make them more vulnerable to be exploited, for sure. And again, our children that are trafficked and have some kind of familial involvement is 4 times more prevalent in children that are trafficked into adult trafficking as well. So if you are having familial trafficking as children, is something that's going to happen as you get older as well, that stay in. So some of the dynamics in familial trafficking often involves normalization, right? They normalize the behavior, the activity. This is the process. The mother that was trafficking her daughter, she made it sound she is sexual. Well, she might be sexual, but she was a victim of sexual abuse for a long period of time of her biological father, when she didn't even know what it was. So her body is responding to that, to now that she's in puberty, so she probably is more sexualized than a kid her age that have never been abused. So instead of her getting her counseling or working through this process, it's like, well, here, let me take advantage of that and give me some benefit out of it, right? By saying that it's her fault. She loves sex, so I might as well just traffic her so I can get some money, right? So coercive control, survival-based exploitation, right? If I can exploit her, we can do okay. We can pay the rent. Mom wasn't working, stepdad wasn't working. They were living with a couple that was disabled. They were probably muching off of them as well, right? Taking advantage of them. So it becomes sort of part of the family dynamic. There's common issues in trafficking is the relationship with the trafficker, the history of the abuse, cultural, linguistic barriers, the stigma behind it that keeps these kids involved in that process. And they're trained to lie to law enforcement. And law enforcement, we need to be training our first responders, because that's who comes across these victims many times, is through their routine kind of duties that they do. And so if we train those first responders, our investigators are that have additional training, they know that stuff. But our first responders that have 1 or 2 or 3 year being out in the field may not have the same training, right? And that's who we need to be training. Your CAC folks, we should be going to law enforcement, going to those agencies and providing the training, the in-service, every so often, give a 30-minute presentation of different topics about how to handle certain situations with victims out in the field. And they appreciate that. There's been many times I've gone to police departments and sheriff's departments, and I've trained during their help me out, guys. I'm forgetting what it's called. Briefing. Thank you. Just that sometimes my brain just don't quite work. And so yeah, just basic information. You catch all the shifts that are coming on, and you give them a few little training to help victims out there. Victims oftentimes frequently move, so there's no connection. They're never long enough in one place to find out any social services or making connections with other people that could possibly help them. They distrust those folks that are trying to help them, right? Because they know that if they get found out that they're trying to get services, it could be worse for them. Sometimes they're giving false names, false social securities, different identity, so they're not found. You want to be able to get past all of that and dig in deeper when you do come across some of those victims. You might see some things. It's an older boyfriend or girlfriend that you can see that does not match up, right? The presence that they're controlling or abusive. They don't look at you straight in the eye or on the face. They seem intimidated. They might have injuries, signs of physical abuse or torture, signs of maltreatment, branding tattoos, where they have tattoos that signalize that they belong to a certain person or certain group. Restricted in going to different locations. Their demeanor sometimes being fearful or anxious about stuff, seeming depressed, tense or nervous. There was one time that and my husband's a cop, and it's like, if I'm off, I'm off. You know, he was old and grouchy. And so we came out of a restaurant, and it was an 18-wheeler, and they didn't have the trailer, but it was like several young people were just around outside, like they had gone somewhere and they were just talking outside of this big trailer, and I'm like, that looks suspicious. And he's like, please don't. It's like, just leave it alone. We do not need to get involved. And I said, I don't need to get involved in anything. All I need to do is call 911 and say, hey, can somebody go check on that? That looks weird. Like, my brothers are truck drivers, and that looks really weird to me. Young people coming in and out. I can see maybe a truck driver having a daughter or having their spouse. They look super young. They weren't dressed like we're out working, right? In a trailer or working somewhere. It's like, come on, do that, right? Just call it in. And he was like, please. And I said, I'll do it anonymous. And he's like, okay. So I did it anyway, because he wasn't gonna convince me not to. And it's like, somebody just needs to check. I don't know what happened. I didn't call back. I was not gonna call back. He's like, we need to leave it alone. And I said, okay, well, it's better for me to call 911 than for me to go over there and investigate, right? It's like, I don't need to become an interviewer right then in the street and asking these girls what was going on. It did not look right? You see something, you hear something, you report it. You check it in. I don't know what they did, but I still remember it. They claim being an adult when they clearly not an adult, right? And sometimes even their bodies might look like they're a little bit older, but when you start talking to them, they're just a kid, right? That could be a kid. And it could be adults are getting trafficked. It's not just young kids. It's the young kids we deal with just because we have the Child Advocacy Center here, and that's the population you would deal with most. But there could be adults that is being trafficked as well that they're coming across through. They lack identification. They have nothing, right? Little kids don't have identification. They might have a school ID, right? So they might not have anything anyway. But if they're older, they could be able to produce a driver's license, Social Security, something that identifies an ID, right? Even if they don't drive. Presence of different documentation and different names that could possibly be a problem. Like those girls in that thing, they should have had something with them, right? If they were adults or who they were, it's like what's happening there. Frequent movement, for sure. They came just visiting or clarifying an address. I had a case that I had worked with, and supposedly it was the husband and wife and this young teenage girl. She was under 15, so there were some concerns there. They apparently had gone to Chicago, and they were coming back, and Oklahoma really works I-35 and 40, that just the way the highways are connected. Money usually goes south, drugs go north, right? That's a way that usually they work it. And so they did a traffic stop on this guy who was driving too fast and find this kid. He gave him authorization to search the car. There was no drugs, but they found a suitcase, and the suitcase had a bunch of 90s. right? They have this girl, initially she did say that she was older, but she ended up fessing up that she was younger. I went ahead and interviewed her, and she said that basically her family was friends with their family. They went to Chicago, husband and wife got into a fight. Wife ended up flying home, and she stayed back with him. And so that's why they were driving back. He was saying that stuff was his wife. The wife wasn't there, so we're like, that looks really suspicious, right? So we're trying to talk with her about, was she being trafficked, right? Was something going on between him and her? She initially did not disclose, but through more questioning, she ended up saying that they had kissed and kind of made out, but didn't have sex, right? She's underage, right? So he was arrested. I don't know what happened to the case because I just come in and do the interview. But was it trafficking, or was it he just taking advantage of the kid, got into a fight with the wife, or maybe the wife got mad at him because he was trying to do something with this girl, right? So who knows what had happened, but definitely did not look like it was normal. No personal possessions, no financial records, inconsistency stories, inappropriate address for court if they end up there, excessive amount of sexual partners. And if you get these kids, they're gonna be interviewed. If you get, and this is on regular cases as well, that they should talk to a medical professional to have a wellness check, because they're less likely to disclose to me any penetration, right? Any oral, but sometimes they're worried about their body. So they're more likely to tell a nurse, a doctor that's doing those exams that, hey, yeah, something happened down there. I've had it happen many times. But unfortunately, some of the teams, some of our CACs and MDTs, they have it even in their policy that unless you have a disclosure of skin-to-skin contact, they don't get a medical. It's like we should be utilizing. That's why Bud Kramer, the father that started all this, created this MDT and including medical professionals as part of our MDT. We should be utilizing them a lot more. You might have traffickers that are less organized, or you might have some that are more organized, where that it is a business. It's large, or it could be small. It could be an international type of a crime that they're doing, but it could be very informal. It could be a family member, right? A network of people that recruit adults for sex acts, and young people as well. It could be gangs that are involved in this process as well. So when we look at victims, what helps, right? They're going to avoid that confrontation, avoid why didn't you leave, right? Understand the trauma bonds. We need to be more understanding that it's not about why didn't she leave, or why didn't she call, or why didn't she ask for help, right? It's about what is going on, right? Tell me about what's going on. I want to know. Safety planning, and then the MDT coordination, us working together. A lot of times we don't work together like we should, and that impacts the outcome of cases. And so some things and ideas of why victims a lot of times don't seek help is because they might not be able to access anyone, right? They're kept locked in. They're only allowed to go out when they're doing the work. They're always with someone that's watching or monitoring. We've had victims that have the air tags, right, that they put on them so they know exactly where they're going. So we need to be looking for those things and asking about it. Has someone ever given you an air tag? Has someone ever looked at your track your activity. Threats of violence, fear of retaliation, not only to them, but to family members, right? When you look at migrants, sometimes they're threatening to harm someone back home if they don't do what they're supposed to do. And realizing that is really difficult for victims to talk about activities and things that they've had to do. And that a lot of times they blame themselves, right? But you gotta remember that they were groomed and they were manipulated, and sometimes they do believe everything that person says. You might look at a cult situation that she was talking about, how they really believe everything that they are told. Because some people just have that era about them, right? That they convince anyone to do anything. Let's see, social barriers or unfamiliar surroundings, right? Bless you. That they don't know anything, so they feel like they can't get any help or understands. They feel like the whole world is kind of caving in them, and this is the only connection to the outside world that they have is the perpetrator. Distrust of law enforcement. They're being brainwashed to say law enforcement does not help, right? These are all the things that they're gonna do that goes against what their instincts are telling them, right? The perpetrator tells them, law enforcement's not helping, you're gonna be in jail, you're gonna be told that it was your fault, right? That this is happening. Some perpetrators tell victims that they can get to them even if they're arrested, right? That they have people connected all over, so they're able to get it. And all the victims gotta do is watch TV shows. And sometimes you get those TV shows and they believe that this is exactly what could possibly happen. Yes, ma'am?
And when they leave, somehow they find them. Like they leave and then they get them back, and then they're beat worse, or they're made to have sex with so many people again, whatever. So yeah, they're really afraid to get out.
Yeah, they are. And sometimes what happens in my friend that has that place for trafficking victims, and when she teaches, she talks about this, is that they have this individual, the trafficker, right, that has groomed them to do all these things. And sometimes they give them a lot of things, right, and let them do things, but they also have to do the bad things, right? So they're like, the good things kind of overshadow the bad, and so they continue doing it. So when you think about trying to rescue them, they feel like, you're gonna put me in this place that has rules, right? I have nothing. I don't know people. They don't understand me. I can't identify with them. And so they end up contacting the perpetrator, and then they come and pick them up. When they're already working through that process that ends up being too hard for them, right? So it's easy for us to say, look, we're helping you. We're trying to help you. We're trying to change things for you. But they're the ones that have to do the work, and sometimes it's not easy. So they're like, I'd rather go back and deal with that than all this unknown that's very, very difficult. So looking at cooperation, there's got to be more than just that child telling you the information, right? That we have to get the details. We have to corroborate the things that they say. We have to think of not making that child or that adult stand alone when we don't corroborate their statements to help. In a lot of these cases, physical evidence is gone on their body, right? They may or may not have it. But there's other things that you can look at. Get the phones, and we'll talk about that. You know, get different statements from other people, the history, or get a confession from the suspect, right? Also, interviewing that suspect as well. Some people say, well, they're not gonna say anything, so we're not even gonna try. Well, sometimes they are dumb, right? And they think they know more than you do, and they can put one over you. So they still talk to law enforcement. Look for evidence of grooming, how this person came in contact, and take their perspective, right? If it was a relationship they built, tell me how that relationship was. How did it make you feel? How did you feel when he said that he wanted you to be the girlfriend, right? Take their perspective, even though you don't believe. You know, it might be a 15-year-old girl with a 30-year-old man, right? But you're not gonna try to educate that was not the best choice that they made, right? You take their perspective to be able to get the information through that grooming. How the conversation started, what did you guys talk about? How did you feel when he talked about that, you know? How did he or she make you feel when you were talking about the things that were going on at your home, right? Because that's what they were looking for, someone to listen to them, and they found that. I mentioned our Child First protocol that really helps interviewers through the process of the protocol, the model, to ask these questions. We specifically teach about interviewing victims of trafficking and asking questions about other types of victimization. So we talked about runaway kids that take off, right? A lot of times they were victims of, in their own home, something was happening that then made them run away, and that we need to ask about that. What was causing that to happen? Victims may still be under the influence of alcohol or substance abuse when they are found, right? When you have that initial contact with them. So that interview might have to wait a little bit until they feel okay. But then you have to find that safe place that they're not gonna contact that abuser. So you're gonna have to find that right place for them so they're not taken off. Having to build rapport, it takes a long time to build rapport with these victims. That's why our process of that expanded protocol or model is really helpful for these types of cases, because you can it's one interview that you can divide up in different sessions. It's called the Child First Expanded Model. And so you can spend one session on just building rapport with these type of victims, and that's really helpful with them, because you're not pushing them through, and then you have given them a lot of time to be able to talk about what has happened. Prioritize that safety, right, and their needs. If you are a service provider and deals with these victims, and you start finding out information that a victim was trafficked, you need to involve law enforcement immediately. Don't try to talk to the victim, get information, and then call law enforcement. If you just suspect that they were a victim, then you need to call law enforcement and let them take over that communication with the victim. The victim, a lot of times, is going to start out by denying that they were victims, right? That they participated in things, like the girl that was recovered. She was like, nobody made me do drugs. I wanted to do drugs. You know, I wanted to be out there with them, and they feel guilty about it, right? And they don't want to get other people in trouble because they felt like they participated, right? If I had not run away, or if I had not been asking for drugs, then they would be in trouble because I was the one that was asking, right? They just don't really understand that, you know, they can't be responsible for adults not knowing that this is a young kid and you shouldn't be giving them, even if they ask you for drugs. We have to remember that a lot of working with these victims, there's a lot of similarities than working with victims of domestic violence, that cycle of abuse, right? That there's always a honeymoon, that they're treated really well, and then they're treated bad, and then they're treated really well, right? And they're in that cycle, and it's hard to get out of that, to step away from it, because they remember the good, the good has come out. Avoid labels, right? In saying you were trafficked, or you were a prostitute, or they were prostituting you, right? Take their perspective of what it was like, right? Just not really naming one thing or another. And understand that trauma bonds, right? Just like anything, you know, if you have ever been involved in an accident or a major event with someone else, it kind of keeps you together, right? It kind of bonds you together because of this situation. Just expect it that there's any time that there's going to be a recantation, or they're going to minimize abuse. That initially they start talking about something very minor, and then later on, after they have therapy and process some of the trauma that they have experienced, then that's when they're going to be talking about some of the more severe stuff. That takes time. It takes time. And that you are going to have to spend more time building rapport, and it's a natural process for them to just distress the system, because the system sometimes has failed them. And you might want to talk about that. You know, talk about when they were in foster care. What was foster care like? Acknowledge that sometimes the system does not work, right? And that it failed them. You're going to ask those open-ended questions just like we normally do. You're going to staff with your team, work together as a team. Always being aware of time, that these cases could take a long time. I'm always impressed and also a little worried that my Homeland Security and FBI partners, when they come in and work a case, and they keep the victim in the room interviewing them for 6 or 8 hours. It's really hard. The longest interview that I've done, it was 4 hours, and the kid wanted to be done, right? And we gotta go with what the child wants, right? I took some longer breaks during that time, but I was exhausted, and that kid just wanted to be done. And this is what happens with this victim. Sometimes they just want to be done, and they're not allowed to. But there is a process that allows you for you to defend if you talk to the child more than one time, but it's still one interview, right? You know when you're ending and how you're starting it. Definitely can take that training. Digital evidence, huge benefit for these cases if you do your homework with that. The problem is that a lot of times getting information from those digital apps, that you have to get a warrant, you have to do extra processing, and it takes a while to get them. Downloading the phone, right, to get all that information is going to take time, but you're able to get it. Other things that you could find in trafficker cases, call logs, photographs, video, audio, online accounts, emails. I mean, search and ask the victim about that business side of it. The phone has tons of information that they can get. It takes a while. It takes special processes. So if you don't have your local law enforcement trained, then you have to send it to the State Bureau of Investigation, and that takes a while because a lot of people are doing that, and it takes a while to get that information. But it doesn't mean that you can't go back and not re-interview the child, but do a follow-up interview with that victim, to talk about some of the things that you recover and get additional information. How many of you use emojis? Yeah, lots of you. Well, emojis are used to communicate different things in that world. And so be aware of those things that could mean differently. We might be asking the victim, I noticed that there was an email emoji on this text. What did that mean to you? What did it mean to this conversation, right? Because they have different meanings for things that we see it a little bit different. I remember the first time that my husband sent me a peach. And I was like, what the hell is he doing sending me a peach? What does that even mean? And my kids is like, Mom, boo, my dad, like, what? I said, you just sent me a peach, what the hell? And they're like, oh, Mom, he wants something now. And I'm like, what? So that was kind of telling. This heart, I've been using this heart for a long time. It's like airplane, that means different, you know? I mean, I can see the banana and the eggplant, right? You can kind of see some of that. Okay, even the grapes for testicles, like the 2 beers, I would have gotten that. Cherry, you can kind of see that. The taco, we've always known that, and the little key, you know, but yeah, I did not know. I've been sending this heart for a long time. Childlike, okay, child virgin. I send that flower all the time because I love plants. So yeah, I've been talking nasty to people. That just happens. A pair of traffic girls with the little, you know, sometimes you're just dancing. I love dancing. I've sent that emoji. So lots of things. I did not, the female orgasm, I'm just thinking that's just a rainy day. You know? I do not know. Male ejaculation, I do not get it. A microphone? How does that? But they have different things. A tent, male erection, I wouldn't have gotten that, right? So, educate yourself, educate your team, educate your first responders, because sometimes they're looking at phones. They get permission to look at phones. People are like, oh yeah, you can look at it, there's nothing there. Well, because you don't know, but if you know, you can figure out a lot of different things with this. These are a bunch of different things. I hope you can see it. It's very light. Maybe you can see it on the handouts. I think they were going to give you guys copies of the handouts, but it was taking some time. But a lot of different things. I did some undercover work. In the short time that I was a cop, because I was bilingual, I was actually involved in a lot of the units. I did some undercover. And I know my husband prepped me, because we were working, he was my backup. And you know, because there's lingual for every profession, right? And criminals have lingual as well. And that profession has some too. And so they were teaching me, and that was before all this stuff, the emojis and all the stuff that happened. And some guy said, you know, that he wanted half and half, and my husband's like, she has no idea what that means. And it's like, no, like half and half of what, a sandwich? I mean, I'm not doing a half and half milk. You know, I did not know what that was. So I had to talk myself through that process. So partnering with service providers is really great. Sounds like you guys are doing great in your community. Know what services are out there that are available, and being able to work these cases and educate those service providers in case they come across victims that have experienced this victimization, to not conduct their own investigation, making sure that they're aware of confidentiality, and then communicating with law enforcement as well. And online trafficking locales that you can find lots of stuff that we've already talked about, where you can find this. So responding to the victim, you have the service provider, the victim that's being trafficked, right? You have 2 separate organizations. You have federal law enforcement, and you have the prosecution. They have to be working together to be able to successfully prosecute these cases, because if they're not working it, the prosecutor can't prosecute them, right? So everyone has to be working together to be able to get it. And again, you know, service providers not conduct their own investigations, avoid taking notes on the crime, listen to the victims, but you should be helping them to trust law enforcement and working with the professionals so that they can work these cases as well. And then they're going to need emergency types of needs, right? That clothing, just personal items, not just transitional housing, but long-term housing, right? that's when they are at risk of going back to that perpetrator because they can't think of what that long term is going to look like. It's just too hard, too difficult to process and deal with. And we want to do these baby steps, or sometimes we're pushing them through the process a little too quick, and they have a hard time working through that. That long-term support they really need, including employment, a safety plan, right? Transportation, education, because they might have been involved in this process for a very long time since they were young, and they didn't have the education that they needed, and so the whole world seems really, really difficult for them, for victims. Let's see, what else I want to highlight. That when families are the ones that are exploiting the children, it's something that's gradual. A child no longer has a non-offending caregiver, right? So they feel alone. They don't feel like they have anyone. They can't go to that person that we would normally say is the safe person, because your safe people are the ones that committed all these things. So it's even harder for them. Feeling guilty or blame, right? Sees no way out, and this is the closest to a family member that they have seen, right, is their trafficker. So there's a huge connection with them. So again, building trust with them, doing that reassurance, doing the one-on-one interaction is ideal. Don't gang them into, I see a lot of law enforcement folks that they get eager to talk to them, and they're like, okay, so this investigator, this officer, and this person needs to find out everything that they say, so we're just going to put all of them in a room and interview the victim. That is not the way to go about it. There are professionals, interviewers that can help you do that. That's why we encourage CACs to not be really kiddie-like. So a center has to be done in a way that is service older kids that have been exposed to adults, right? Being almost adults. So when they come in, we don't want them to feel like they're at a preschool, right? They want them to feel that this place is also for them as well. So we want them to feel comfortable. And we want the interviewer to be able to talk with them in a way that is at their developmental level, and also they're street smart, right? To talk to them in a way that is not talking down to them as well. And don't vilify the trafficker, because that's never going to help, right? If you're saying the trafficker, we're going to put them away for a long time, they're not going to get you, that takes a long time. So sometimes the system doesn't work, and so then that trafficker's out, and that victim feels like we didn't do what we were supposed to do and told them we would do, right? Do not expect that full disclosure at the very beginning. It's going to take time to them, and it's their right. If they don't want to talk about it and they're not ready, we need to be okay with that as well, right? Be at their level. Assess the safety and the threats that are given. How can we protect them in the meantime, right? Understand their perspective, their worldview. So be sensitive. Every incident of human trafficking is different. Don't cookie cut every victim. Make sure that you're not putting yourself in the situation and be in danger. We had an agency that was helping victims, but they were putting themselves out there and making connections with the perpetrator, thinking that if they were there, they could keep the child safe. And it's like, that doesn't work that way. They're not going to care about you. If the suspect, if you suspect that there's the victim is in imminent danger, you really need to be calling the police and working with them as well. Present of outreach cards and hotlines. A lot of times we give information to victims, and that can be something that the perpetrator finds and could have consequences for them. So we have to be very careful of how we provide the information to them, especially if they're going to go right back, that might be something that could cause them problems, because it shows that they have tried to seek help as well. Pay attention to some of the new trends that AI generated, child sexual abuse. Some states, some federal are looking at doing some laws, putting laws on the books that punish people for creating AI generated CSAM, because it's getting out there. It is freaky what people can do with AI. I know my daughter and my daughter-in-law, they don't have any children. Haven't been married very long, and they put a picture of their spouses together, and they asked AI to create a family, and they created a boy and girl for them, and it looks like them. It's creepy what they can do, and it looks like they actually were like, they might have had their hands down, but when they created the family, their hand is around their daughter. It's like they can do anything with AI. And so the suspects, of course, are using it for bad, creating child sexual abuse material. But at least now we're getting laws to prohibit that as well and punish people for doing it, because they're distributing that and eventually someone's going to get hands-on, right? So it's just continuing that cycle. We talked about the interviewing considerations. Always be neutral in your interviews. Meet the child where they're at, show respect, and ask those open-ended questions, exploring different details. It's important to find that cooperation, that grooming. Know that sometimes memory is going to be fragmented, because a lot of the abuse might have happened when they were under the influence. And it's not because they don't want to tell you or they're lying to you. It might just be that that's all they remember. So be okay with that as well. Okay, any questions about this training that we went through? Anything? All right, I think you guys deserve another 10-minute break. Were you gonna do evaluations when we come back?
I can put it up real quick, and it's just like a code they can scan.
Here, I have it. Lift it up, maybe you can get a grip on it.
Do you do stuff virtually?
Yeah, Siri, we do a lot of training virtually.
I told her, I said, I was here at my table, and she's like, I'll sit over. I'm like, I'm not moving up there, that's weird. And she's like, no, I'll sit over, we could. I'm like, there's nobody here. I was late, so I was trying to like find the person to seat, and I just sit down.
Listen, all the kids are right here and all the mothers are upstairs.
No, that's not weird right there. I want to be like out here though.
Well, depending on your state statutes, you have to have, if it's a the adult victims. Yeah, that's a little bit different because they are adults. And I don't know what the statute is like as far as reporting. I don't know if
You're 36?
For adults, it is different, but you have to look at your statute and talk to an attorney to see what consequences it could be. Does it need to be an anonymous report, and how much information do you provide?
Oh, okay.
See, and that's the thing. If it's a child, you would have to report it to the hotline, and then that activates the MDT, so you're not talking directly to the team with them. If it's an adult, a victim, there's got to be something that you have to work within your state laws. Then you can report it. I know there's a hotline in our state that they can report it to with the adults, and it's anonymous. It's information to give that detail. And it's anonymous. So he's not saying that you did it, but you've got to report something. And so, you know, I don't know if you identify a victim in the shelter, and then you're working with your mental health staff to help that victim want to be, that would be another kind of a roundabout way to be able to do it with the trauma. But I would definitely look at your statutes to see what it actually says when it comes to a crime and an adult victim versus a child. A child, it takes the responsibility off of you. You don't have to confirm that it is abuse or anything like that. Yeah. Because if you're able to do it anonymous, and you report it anonymous, and you report it, the MDT actually eventually gets it, and then they can start the investigation that comes through. It takes it out of your hands, and you're not giving information specific. You're not coming in to the MDT and doing it in
Find photos.
Actually, a lot of people have photos from that crazy girl, so thankful for that.
No, you can't do that. What I always do in our staffing, I know some teams invite one person to the staff, and it should only be the MDT. I should only bring you when it involves a client that has maybe had services at the shelter, and I would do a hypothetical. Like, hypothetical, how about this situation, how would you handle that? And if that person came to your shelter, how would you that, or we have this situation, and this is a situation that we have, what would you advise be how we can help this person, right? So we just, we don't exchange names or information, it's just, I need your expertise in that process, so I'll bring you in to help us deal with this situation. And it's all signed by confidentiality before you sign that stuff. I don't have one with me, but I'll give you my cell and I'll give you my email address at the end.
No, that's what I'm saying. When you see, if I get, like you said, you know, class with 4 or 5 years,
Double dip, so I started raising
And this has been probably a few years, since we updated there, so it's probably a lot of Exactly. I had a whole printout of different acronyms when my kids were teenagers and stuff, and just they would text me stuff, and I'm like, what is that? And so yeah, I have a whole book. Right. Yeah, I could definitely try to get that to you. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, we'll bring in everybody and tell them really quick that they need to get this and then work on the evaluation real quick, and then we can switch it. Yeah, we'll take it noon. Yeah, I should be able to get through this one.
Let me know if I know what we're
Yeah, totally fine.
Do we need to do evaluations throughout or just one at the end of the day?
We have several ones for each session.
So this is the first one, right?
During arrest or during why, but they see what, and it should, I mean, that's fine, I just wanna make sure that everybody. Because that's mom just got right in your mom. And I was like, oh yeah, I saw him too.
And the whole.
And actually, we had, an interview calling us like, excuse me, 18 times a day. And so I saw I know the LCD number, or I know the real on my heart, and I'm like, I'm not taking this call. And he turned up, and he said, Jeremy Vaughn, and I was like, hello? And he's like, hi, this is Sean Lopez. And I'm like, what's going on? Why does nobody use their own lives?
But they
I know, but then it won't go back.
my parent of my little closet. Yeah, in FaceTime. I'm like, what in the oh, I had personalized. That's how she's But do they just keep it everywhere? I kind of wonder.
The child, and then they start grooming or manipulating the environment to the child so they can get access to them, right? And then they build rapport and trust with the child and anyone that could protect that child, be it a school environment, be it a church, or the parents, right? Grandparent would do that, right? And I was like, honey, it's all professions. I mean, you've heard detectives who are working sexual abuse cases get arrested for this. So anyone could do this kind of thing, is that they groom people to believe that there's no way that they could possibly do it, right? And so to have that access to those kids, so they have to select the victim. They're only any person in our workplace, any person in our social groups, right? That they could be doing those things at home with kids. So it could be anyone. So giving you some more statistics about trafficking. And again, it's something that it is worldwide. It's not just the United States. It's not just third world countries. It's not just one state. You know, it used to be said that Oklahoma, because Highway 40 goes through it, and then 35 goes through it in the middle, and they intersect, that we were the capital of trafficking and drugs, right? That going through that corridor between 35 and 40. But it's not necessarily the case. I think those numbers were inflated to make the state be that way. I think it's always been, our numbers could be higher than some others because they've actually worked those cases and have been making it a priority for our state. I think some people think of maybe trafficking in big cities, right? New York, Los Angeles, thinking about because they're just the sheer population in those cities, that they think about that's where trafficking happens, but that's not the case. It could happen anywhere. It doesn't matter the size of community. If you have humans, bad things happen sometimes because we think to do that. I know I was talking to someone during lunchtime about it's like, who thinks of doing this crazy stuff with AI? You think it's like, oh, they're creating pornography with AI and images with children. It's like anything that's good, humans can ruin it, right? They can utilize it for bad. It's gonna happen. So it could involve any nation, anywhere around the world, for sure. It's the act of recruitment, right, and transportation, and there's got to be some transfer of goods, harboring. It could be the receipt of a person, right, services that they're doing. It could be different things. In 2000, there was a federal law that was passed in combating trafficking, and encompasses the 3 P's, the prosecution and protection and prevention, right? We have done a lot more things to do some education for our children, but I think we are always behind behind the bad elements, right? They are a lot smarter and quicker at doing things than we are sometimes. And a lot of times it's not that we don't want to get out there and do those programs that would help children, that would help families. Everything is costly, and resources for that kind of service, for prevention, is the last thing we think of, right? And so we don't have it, like mental health services, like drug addiction services for folks, right? That if we help with that, it could prevent it. We know that back in the 80s, there was lots of laws that were created for narcotics, right? They were going to punish the traffickers, the gang folks, the whoever that deal in drugs. But just because you're going to send them away for a long time, it doesn't mean that we stopped them, right, from doing it. We penalize them, but we're just creating more jails, and because that didn't stop it. That we still have drugs, and once they take care of one drug, now we have a different drug that comes out. What's the drug that's huge right now? Fentanyl, right? Fentanyl's been put into other types of drugs that is causing a lot of problems. There's huge communities in different parts of the country that people are dying every single day from fentanyl overdose, and they just don't have the prevention and the help. Now we have the medication that we can help someone that we know is addicted to drugs, and we could zap them a little bit and then they're back again, right? And that is saving a lot of lives, but is that prevention? No, it's not, right? They're just plugging in a hole that of this thing that is just it's like trying to you know, just grab a bucket out of the ocean and thinking you're making a difference, right? So lots of things that we're trying to do that we think we're helping, and we're doing the best that we can. We talked about human trafficking earlier. So definition of commercial sexual exploitation of children occurs when an individual buys or trades or sells sexual act with a child. And again, it could be anyone that is doing those things in different ways. Sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, and provision in obtaining of a person for the purpose of commercial sex acts. And victims and their traffickers, a lot of them have that relationship. We talked about that earlier. And history of abuse, different barriers that they might have that put them at risk for being victimized. The stigma and shame into that prevents them from disclosing, right? We talked about victims that have been trained to lie to law enforcement when they are in contact with law enforcement, because they can, in the midst of doing those services, come across law enforcement, but it doesn't mean that they're gonna immediately start telling about what is going on in their lives at the moment. And then sometimes just lack of access to basic needs. Traffickers know that, and so they go to populations that are struggling to get those basic needs met, so then they end up utilizing that against them. Some factors that continue to attribute to that commercial sex trafficking: dysfunction in the family, domestic violence. Have we seen the family composition be sort of changed, or what am I trying to say? Not become as important as it used to be back in the day? Okay. What is the number one thing that in the family has changed compared to was when our parents were at home? What's one thing? Single family homes.
Parental involvement.
Parental involvement.
Gender roles.
It has really, really changed, right? My mom was a stay-at-home mom. You know, I grew up in a DV home, and we would have never thought about reporting it. Folks that knew my parents would have never thought of reporting it. It was normalized just as a community, as a culture, that it was just an acceptable thing that happened. You know, for me, growing up and being independent and having my own job was something that I sought, because I thought that that would prevent me from being ever a victim of domestic violence. It doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're a woman and you're independent and you work, that that's going to keep you, but that was my mentality, right? So I'm always going to be, that was the thing, is I'm always going to have a job. I broke every mold possible of a Hispanic woman, traditional Hispanic woman that my parents had of me, right? I left home right after high school. I married a white guy. I became a cop. I mean, I like went to work, you know, I've always worked. And so it just really changed. I was just having a conversation with my oldest brother that he ended up being deported and is living in Mexico now, and it saved his life, for one. So he's now married, and obviously they're really struggling financially, and we help them, but they struggle a lot. And so his wife is going to work, and probably needed to be working. If it weren't for the rest of the siblings helping them out financially, she would have been working already. But he's like, this is really different for me, and I'm really struggling that she has to go to work instead of me because he can't find work because he's older, right? And they do discriminate down there for the age. They don't just hire, you know, unless you're really young. And I'm like, look, dude, you're gonna have to tie one up. And I said, maybe tie both of them up, because your wife is working. I've worked all the time. He goes, yeah, but I'm not used to that. It's like, yeah, you're gonna have to clean, you're gonna have to feed your kids, you're gonna have to help her and support her because she's helping you get your family ahead of time, right? And so I think culturally, things have changed in the United States with families because it takes two parents almost to work nowadays. Two incomes, right? To survive almost. And so we've taken the mom out of the home to work, and that's impacted how families raise their kids, right? The involvement in different activities. And I think all of that has changed. But again, there's different things that would change also, like technology, right? Now there are kids, little bitty kids, that have access to the internet, right? Sometimes the internet and tablets and little things are babysitters. You go to a restaurant and you see the little kid with the tablet that has a really cute cover, like a little kitty cover. It's like it's normalized because the parents are talking and the kid is quiet because they got the face done. There's no conversation with the kiddos anymore, right? So we have changed as a society, and so there's been a lot of good that the internet has helped, right? During pandemic, one of the things that we learned about was it's okay to teach and have training online. So now everybody does training online. I think now we're trying to get more into the personal, you know, and back in person training, because we get really distracted and we don't get as much when we're taking virtual training unless you're really committed to the training, right? And as a trainer, we're always looking to keep people engaged when we're training virtually because of that. So a lot of things have changed that has really been helpful as a society, but those things have really been things that have impacted how we interact with our kids, and it made them vulnerable to some of these other negative things in the system, right? Because parents are busy, you know, kids don't have that connection. It's easy for kids to not be as engaged. Like some people, kids nowadays don't know how to talk to other kids verbally. They can text, right? And they just don't know how to have that interaction. So when they're in text, that's why we communicate. And they don't write full sentences. That's why we need emojis and, right?
Can't spell either.
Yeah, no. Which I feel like, yeah. There was one thing that I used to do that that was so funny, that is the LOL, right? Left my ass out loud or whatever, laughing like whatever. Laughing out loud, that's what I asked. Is that the LMA? What is it? See, See, yeah, I got it all wrong. So yeah, sometimes I get that. It's like that is not what that means, Maria. That just I'm behind all the time. Yeah. Yeah, some of those things you just don't know how to communicate with kids. Youth in foster care, we talked about runaway, LGBTQIA+ youth, homeless, we talked about that, justice involved youth, modes of interest into recruitment, the grooming techniques that they use, taxes and power and control. We're talking during lunchtime about the religious folks, how some folks, just to have the charisma and how they communicate and how they use folks' vulnerability in belief of God, and they're manipulated, right, because of their need to be close to God, that folks use that to groom them into doing things that most normally you would think that person would have never done that. You know, it's how do you get whole families, mom and dad and the kids, involved with a group, and you're like, they're so committed because they want to have that connection to God, but the way that they're doing it, someone's taking advantage of their love for God and they're using it for wrong, right? To get to their kid, and then they participate in it, and they're like, how did they even get here, right? How did they even realize that? I was watching a video and preparing for another training about Michael Jackson, right? How parents allow their kids to be with Michael Jackson. And there's a documentary where they were interviewing some of the males, the adult males now, how they got involved with that. And it was the kids that they idolized this person that was bigger than God, right? That the whole world knew no matter where you were, and everyone wanted to be close to him. And then he used that to make that child feel like, I'm it. I mean, he says that I'm his friend, and he chose me to be close to him. He's choosing me to be in his bed. How powerful is that, right? And he groomed the parents too. Because some people are saying the parents are responsible for protecting you, the kid. And were you not angry at your mom and dad for leaving you with Michael Jackson? And they're like, no. I mean, initially I wasn't. It was later on till I was out of the situation. Then I realized how I was victimized and taken advantage of by my parents. But then I had to realize that they were also groomed to believe that it was okay. Like if my mom and dad had believed that he would have done these things to me, they wouldn't have left me, right? They wouldn't have done those things. But it's through all that process that they got. And he got a whole family from New Jersey, and he abused all 4 kids, including a female. Where, we always think is the perpetrators choose a sex. They're always either into girls or boys, but it's not into both. Some perpetrators do both. We can't always say, well, he victimized the girls, so we don't need to interview the brothers because they probably didn't do anything to the brothers. No, we need to interview everybody because we never know who they are going to get. So lots of ways that folks get kids and parents to be involved in this process.
Like R. Kelly did you'll be a music star, he can make you a musician or whatever, right?
Yes.
That's the whole family in.
Yeah. Because who would not want their kid
To be famous, right?
to be famous and to support?
Right.
And you want to support your kid. right? That this would be an opportunity. And who would think that that person would do something like that to kids, right? And perpetrators know that. They start very gently approaching the kid and doing things. Some people say, well, why did they not, the child said it didn't hurt. And why did they not have any findings? Because a lot of perpetrators are not going to penetrate the kid the first time they do something, right? They're going to be very gentle with them, because if you're forceful and harmful and you hurt them, they're going to cry and they're going to try to run away, right? It's a process, it's a methodical process that they go through to be able to get the kids. Traffic was controlled, prostitution and stripping in that industry, right? They have a network of folks. They know where those kinds of things are acceptable, how to deal with that business, right? How are they going to get the clientele, right? Again, we talked earlier about if there's no need for it, then you don't have a business. So they go to where it's going to be productive for them, that they're going to make some money. We talked about different areas that they're going to seek out: residential, escort agency, truck stops. How many truck stops do we know that are in your communities nearby? Any major highway that goes through here?
60 to 180?
Yeah. That truck drivers go through? There's a huge oil field, right? Business around here? Would that be a place that traffickers use that industry? Because who works in that industry?
What I've heard, this is a couple years back, before COVID hit, there was an app that you order prostitutes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was an app.
Yeah.
Because the teacher, her husband was in the oil field, and he didn't know about it until when his school told him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Word of mouth,
Uh-huh.
right? Word of mouth. If there's a need, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Who works in the oil fields?
Lots of men.
Men. Right. Do they have their families there? No, not usually. Right? They live in small trailers that live together. Right? Right? Perfect. Right? For ordering up like Lyft, or what's the app that orders? I've never had it, where they bring you food. DoorDash. Yeah. Eats, right? What is it? Uber Eats. There you go. Thank you. Uber Eats. You gotta slow it down for me, guys. Slow it down for me to get it.
Skip the games is the well-known one.
Skip the games? No games, just straight at it. Right? No BS. We have short times. We don't get a whole lot of breaks. We've got to get to it. That's basically what it means. Many victims on Human Tracker are first treated as clients in need of assistance, right? Victims of other crimes, such as domestic violence. And this could be children or the actual adult victims. Sexual assault, sexual abuse, perpetrators of crimes such as illegal immigration or prostitution. That's where you're gonna go, right? Perpetrators get victims from other perpetrators, right? It's not an accepted practice because they go after them, but that's where they recruit them. Oh, he's not treating you right. I'm gonna treat you better, right? They do that. Victims may not always recognize what is being done to them, that it is a crime, because a lot of them are running from something and they're saying, I was the one that sought it out, right? I ran away from home and he found it. He rescued me when I was sleeping on a bench in the park or under the bridge, right? So now he gives me a place to stay. He gives me food. So I'm better than I was. They feel that connection with that perpetrator. may not be aware of the laws that are against that exploitation, right? That it's illegal for them to be doing those things because they initially, or saying, it's like a lot of rape victims. You know, we put it in kids' mind that you have to say no, right? And girls, you have to say no, right? So they think, well, I didn't say no really loud. I was making out with them, so then I didn't say no because my body froze and I didn't know what to say. So then they feel like, well, I must have wanted it because my body responded, right? Is that psychological thing, right? I've had kids that said, well, I didn't say no, and you're supposed to say no, but I didn't know, like I froze, I didn't know what to say. And it was really, I liked it because I was making out with them, but then I was really confused about what he was doing, and I didn't know what else to do. Their kids are getting into situations that is above their developmental level. And they get into a situation that they can't control, and then they feel stuck and feel like they're responsible for it. So some key questions, if a person has been a victim of human trafficking, is the person experiencing or believes that he or she experienced a serious of harm if they try to leave, or they don't work, right? If they can't go do something, or if they don't want to do something, will they be harmed? Is the person free to leave their work situation or the location, right? Is this person experiencing violence or deception or threats? It's like my DV victim, the mom, the girl that I told you about that I interviewed. She was in a domestic violence situation and she wanted to appease her husband. She was not really into having sex with other men, but this is what was going to make her husband happy and their relationship better. So I'm like, you know, I'm willing to do this, just if that's what pleases him and that's what he likes, maybe I'll try it, right? And then when she did it one time, then it just kept happening, and it got more often, and then she found out that he was getting money. And until she figured that out, and then she's like, now I have to work to get an exit plan. And it took her a while, but then she felt that she was stuck in that situation until she was able to get out. Is this person experiencing or doing, or do they believe they would experience a serious harm if they left, not only to them, but to other family that they love and that they care for, like parents or their kids, right? Does this person owe money and they're trying to pay something back for something? Is it drugs that they're trying to pay back? Is it for being smuggled? Is it for giving them a job and they charge them a fee to connect them with this particular job situation? Or is this a minor who was introduced and engaged in commercial sex? And any minor who is introduced and engaged in this, that is considered trafficking according to federal law. Frequent movement, we talked about earlier, that they're just never in a place long enough to make those connections. And then they distress the service providers. They don't know who all is going to know, what all they have to do. They believe that they're going to end up back in the same place where they were before, back at home, and that becomes a problem for them. And again, a lot of times they're taught to lie, that they don't even know what's real anymore, right? They change names, they change the way they communicate with other people, that they lost themselves, that seems like they're always in this like a tornado almost, this wraparound kind of thing of that there's happening so fast that they can't control or stop it. right? Long enough to find out, who am I anymore, right? What am I doing? What is this about? The presence of overly controlling individual. It could be a person, it could be a boyfriend or girlfriend that's involved. Signs of physical abuse, we talked about that earlier. Controlling communication or restriction. A lot of times they only have flip phones, right? Because they don't want to track, they being tracked, but they are tracked in different ways. They can have, so they can communicate with the person that is trafficking